Hi, true crime friends. Thanks for tuning in to Coffee, Cigarettes, and Murder, a true crime podcast. I did want to thank everyone who's been listening. We have gotten quite a few more listeners in the last 2 weeks. I've been really surprised. I've been really impressed by the amount of listeners in Australia, South Africa, Russia, Canada. It's really, really cool to see people around the world listening to your podcast, people in different states of the United States, people in California. We have a lot of people listening in Ohio. It really means a lot to us. Thank you all so much. Today we are going to talk about Daniel La Plante. If you Google evil, you will find that the definition states evil to be profoundly immoral and wicked. And today's story cannot be described as anything but that. Pure evil in a small Massachusetts town. Before we start, we wanted to let you know that this is not for the faint of heart and it is not for children. The people who lived in the same neighborhood as Daniel La Plante remember being wary of him. They remembered a darkness falling onto the street as he approached. Locking their doors in fear of him, they would watch him retreat to the woods alone every day, and they remembered his claim to worship Satan for about a year before these incidents. Daniel's family remembers a different side of him, one that loved his family and would play fondly with his niece.
So this is in the mid-'80s, right?
Yeah, it's 1986.
Right. So before it was like cool to be like dark and emo. Before like Hot Topic, he like had his own dark emo thing going on.
Right, but I mean, I think it still kind of goes with the times. I mean, there was The Cure and Morrissey.
Okay, so he's a big Morrissey fan.
I didn't read that anywhere, but we can only assume.
Right.
Daniel's upbringing did have its problems. He was sexually abused by a therapist and had endured mental abuse by his father. From all accounts, he had a loving, nurturing mother, but it looks as though the damage was already done. Trusted adults that were supposed to be nurturing his adolescence had destroyed it. A medical professional that was supposed to help Danny had hurt him, and now Danny, a hormonal teenager with emotional issues, would go on to hurt others.
I feel like being abused by a doctor is just the ultimate in not only their violation of their own oath, but just in just your patient trust.
And I didn't read if this was a male or female doctor, but depending on those circumstances, I mean, it could get dramatically worse.
That's such a horrible thing.
I've read so many different versions of the Anna and Jessica Andrews story. I believe a lot of things have been really exaggerated over time. I'm going to tell you the story as I believe it to have happened. Sisters Anna and Jessica Andrews were young and heartbroken in 1986. Unfortunately, their mother had passed away from cancer. The girls had been close to their mother, and like any normal children, were having trouble adjusting and coping with this loss. Anna started receiving phone calls from a local boy. He told her that he had seen her around the neighborhood and that he went to a different school, so he got her number from a friend of his that knew her and went to school with her.
I just don't think that would fly today. Getting a number from a friend and then just like randomly calling someone.
Well, now there's the internet.
Yeah, first you would have to like add them on Facebook and then wait for them to respond and maybe send them like a little thumbs up. You can't just call somebody and be like, hey, I got your number from someone.
Right, yeah, that is super creepy. I mean, well, because now we have cell phones. Then it was landlines, and there was the yellow pages.
Right, this is before caller ID, even.
Right, everybody had the yellow pages. Danny described himself as tall, athletic, blonde, and Anna couldn't wait to meet him when he asked her to go and get ice cream with him. But when Danny showed up at her door, he was not the person that he had described. She had been 80s catfished. Anna was taken aback by his dark, greasy hair, his unclean appearance, and his terrible acne. He was not the person that he had described to her. Now, Danny was athletic. He ran track and he played football, But I just think probably to describe himself as athletic, Anna probably expected him to have a bigger build. And Danny did not have that big muscular build that she would have been expecting. But Anna went on this date anyway. She was raised not to be rude, and so off they went. But as they were walking and talking after they had gotten ice cream, Danny took an extra interest in Anna's mother's death, wanting to know things like what were her last moments like? What was it like to have her die? And Anna was not happy with this extra interest, and when she got home, she was happy to shut her door, put her pajamas on, and vowed to never see Danny La Plante again. Even though Danny ran track and played football, he was known as a loner. He was ridiculed because of his greasy appearance and acne. He struggled academically too. Danny was diagnosed with dyslexia and hyperactivity disorder. And we all know kids can be cruel. But then again, who's to say that Danny wasn't the one that was cruel? Neighbors recall an aura of destruction around Danny as he walked down the street. They remember locking their doors and turning the other way. People generally were in fear of him. And I guess that all goes back to the nature versus nurture argument. Anna and Jessica were finding themselves home a lot more now that their mother wasn't there to care for them. While their dad was at work, the girls decided to try to contact their mother with a homemade Ouija board. The girls didn't get very far before their father came home from work and demanded that they stop. He did not like that sort of thing. And when they did stop, Anna and Jessica did not close out the Ouija session, which would have led an open portal for spirits to come through, as people believe, or as Jessica and Anna would have believed when they started hearing knocking on the walls later that night in the house. The girls, like any early teenagers would, immediately run to their father and tell him that the ghost of their mother or a demon or something is in the house. But their dad dismisses them, thinking they're playing games and just acting out due to the death of their mother. But this continued. Things were moving around. There was knocking on the walls, and all this was happening when the girls were home alone. The girls tell their father, and he just doesn't believe them. This poor grieving father thought that his grieving children were just going insane. Eventually, the girls hear a knocking coming from the basement, kind of on a pipe, and they grab a butcher knife and they walk down to the basement together. The girls find writing on the wall, and the writing says, "I'm in your bedroom, come find me," in what appears to be blood. The girls do not go into the room. They are not the type of girls that are going to run upstairs in the horror movie. They run out of the house and go directly to the neighbor's house. They stay at the neighbor's house hysterical until their father arrives home from work. So in some accounts, I read that there was one more instance. I read that in this instance, the father did not believe them and he dismissed them and even apologized to police and told them that they were going to go to therapy. Those accounts seem to insinuate that there was one more incident where Danny did come out and write on another wall in the house, and in which case the girls did do the same thing and the dad did come home. Regardless of if there was one more instance or not, the ending of the story remains the same. The dad had come home from work to find the girls at the neighbor's. He goes into the house and he sees that things are amiss. And he goes down to the basement and he sees this writing on the wall that appears to be in blood, but is in reality in ketchup. And his first thought is that the girls had done this. But upon entering the room, he doesn't find evidence that the girls had done this. He finds Danny La Plante standing in his daughter's room. Danny's wearing a blonde wig and his wife's clothing, and in some accounts I did read that this was her wedding dress even, with his wife's makeup on, and I read some kind of conflicting stories here too. Some people just said he was wearing his wife's makeup. Some people say he had his face painted like an Indian. Danny was holding a hatchet. The father vacated the house and immediately called police. And him, and I'm assuming the neighbors and probably the girls, they watch this house and they make sure that Danny does not leave this house. So the police come and then they search the house, and what they find is that they cannot find Danny La Plante. So they keep searching, and eventually somebody notices that there is some furniture that is amiss. And they move this furniture, and lo and behold, there is a door. And behind that door is Danny La Plante. I have read in some stories that this was a whole like tunnel system through their house, like a whole crawl space type system. But I think that the most reliable source that I read, it was just a kind of like a large type of cabinet in an awkward spot behind some furniture. And I think that that's probably what this really was. So when they looked in this cabinet, they find evidence that Danny had lived in this cabinet for up to 2 months. You know, based upon like food wrappers and just things that they're finding in the cabinet, things that he was taking from the house, you know, when things started moving, up to 2 months. So there was a dangerous person living in these girls' house, torturing them, making them think that they were crazy for 2 months. And that is what has been terrifying me in my own home.
What an incredible timeline of events for these two girls.
Right, like did he move into the walls just because their mother had died? I mean, how could he have known that they were going to use the Ouija board?
So the mom dies, terrible. They try to summon her spirit, and then either he's already in the house, or by just some stroke of horrible luck, he happens to get into the house at that point. After, he doesn't even know that they did that.
I think he had to have known.
But either way, it's just an incredible coincidence, I guess. Like
really is
that they happen to own a home that has a tunnel system in it. Like, did you see the house?
I could not find pictures of the house. I actually looked for pictures of the house. I really don't know, like, if this was a large cabinet or if it was actually a crawl space system. But I think just the story has gotten embellished over the years. I think it probably just was a large cabinet.
Either way, I mean, so my house isn't that big, but I'm pretty sure I know if someone was living here.
You think, but wait until we finish this story.
No, it's just... And they just happen to also have a home that has this, like, tunnel system in it and crawl space. Like, I'm picturing, like, the Home Alone house.
Like, it has to be big.
It has, like, white pillars in front and, like, 18 windows on the outside. And it's just, like, 4,000 square feet.
I mean, it has to be relatively big for all this to have gone on and nobody to have noticed.
Yeah, this is not happening in a bungalow.
The stars really did align here.
Right.
So at this time, I'm not sure if Danny is arrested because there's another incident that I want to tell you about. And I am looking at these incidents in a 1986 newspaper. So it didn't really give me the dates of the two incidents. So I do want to tell you the second incident as well. And I think both these incidents together, regardless of the order that they occurred in, led to the arrest of Danny La Plante. Danny La Plante liked to break into places. He would often break into homes and steal things, sometimes moving things to play with the heads of the people who lived there. This is a story about Daniel that I did not see in many places. I only found it in an old newspaper clipping from 1987. I think earlier I said 1986, but this was a newspaper clipping from 1987. Danny had broke into the home of the Bauer family. Father Frank, daughters Tina, Karen, and their friend Kathleen were there when Danny broke in. They escaped through a bedroom window. Danny sold money and jewelry while he was in there burglarizing them. One of these two instances, either the Andrews family or the Bauer family, led to Danny being arrested, and he was put into a psychiatric hospital. I believe he was there for slightly more than a year. The Andrews family was so distraught after this incident, and I feel like I agree with them. I feel like I would have done the same. They actually moved out of their home. The Bowen family stayed in a hotel until Danny was locked away. I feel like that really says something about Danny La Plante and the feelings of his neighbors and the people that knew him and the fear that he really invoked in people. It's 1987 at this time, and Danny has had prior offenses. The courts have decided to try him as an adult. At one point, Danny's mother even remortgaged their house to bail him out, and the house just happened to be on Elm Street. When I was listening to this, I felt really bad for his mother, remortgaging her house to bail him out, and then he ended up going to jail for the rest of his life.
Yeah, everybody probably had 3 or 4 mortgages in the 80s, so it probably wasn't that big of a deal.
But as if the thought of someone living in your walls and mentally torturing your children is not enough, here is where the story really goes south. It was 1987 and Danny La Plante had been released from the psychiatric facility. Danny went through the woods one day, coming out on the other side. He broke into the Gustafson house.
I believe that's Gustafson.
I'm probably not going to say that right at all. I'm really sorry, everyone. I'm horrible with names.
Yeah, you're making him sound like a Russian hockey player, kind of.
Well,
Gustav.
Maybe they want to be Russian hockey players. Who knows? 33-year-old expecting mother Priscilla Gustafson was home from teaching nursery school with her 5-year-old son, William. Danny proceeded to rape and kill Priscilla, using a pillow to silence 2 gunshots to the head. Danny then proceeded to take poor William into the bathroom and drowned him in the bathtub. Danny waited for poor 7-year-old Abigail to come home from school and drowned her in the family's secondary bathroom bathtub. Danny then proceeded to move on with his day, going to his 6-year-old niece's birthday party. He was tickling her and had cake with the family. Mr. Gustafson came home that day to find the people that meant the most to him in the world brutally murdered.
Well, he really took a big leap there from just breaking in and stealing a few things here and there and scaring some people. Like, he really jumped it up like next level.
I mean, that's definitely next level. I mean, living in somebody's walls is pretty concerning, though. But to go from that to murder of 3 seems pretty extreme, pretty fast.
Yeah, sounds like he did not receive very good treatment in the psychiatric hospital he was in.
Right. I can't find exactly how police knew it was him, but it seems like they started looking into Danny right away. I'm sure a little bit to do with his record, maybe. The first time they questioned him, they couldn't arrest him. There was not enough evidence. It wasn't until they checked the spot the neighbors would watch him walk into the woods every day that they had the evidence they needed to arrest Danny La Plante. But he had fled, and a manhunt ensued that included a state police helicopter, police dogs, and nearly 50 officers. They found Danny hiding in a trash bin in a lumber yard. He received 3 15-year life sentences and is still in prison to this very day. There was some talk about him getting out. A law was passed a while back having to do with juvenile cases. The basis of the law is that they don't want juvenile offenders spending the rest of their lives in prison. But Priscilla's sister attended the hearing and asked the question, whose life is it that's not worth the 15 years? Is it pregnant Priscilla's? Young William's? Young Abigail's?
So, say this was like 1988 that he got convicted. That would be 12 plus 21, 33. So he'd have like 12 years-ish remaining on his sentence.
And I'm going to answer that for you in just a second here. Forensic psychologist Dr. Sela, I'm probably not saying that right, also attended the hearing and stated that Daniel's brain development did not influence these crimes. The doctor states that Daniel is only faking tears and has never shown actual remorse. Fortunately, they did not let him out of prison, and he will not be up for parole again until the age of 62. Now that we've told our story about Daniel La Plante living in the walls of Jessica and Anna Andrews, I thought we would leave you with some other real-life stories about people living in the walls. About a year ago in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, a 14-year-old girl got involved in a relationship with an 18-year-old man. They had at one point run away together. News 4 says that 18-year-old man started living in the girl's family's attic and coming down into their 14-year-old girl's bedroom at night. One day, the parents walked in and saw him at the top of the stairs, standing there, staring down at them. The man refused to leave the home, but the family did call police, and police did make him leave.
I'm sorry, so they just made him leave? I mean, he's obviously broken, like, several laws at this point. It's like one of them being, like, statutory rape, most likely, and breaking and entering, and trespassing, and, yeah, you just need to go.
I don't know if he was charged with statutory rape. I think that there might have been a trespassing issue there. The parents might not have wanted to charge him with statutory rape because there was an issue with their daughter and she was already being defiant. And, you know, sometimes you're walking a fine line with kids like that.
You know, also, don't any of these people own dogs? We got people living in the walls, people living in attics, people breaking in, jumping out windows, and no one's got a dog.
Right, because we all have dogs, and no one would ever do that in our houses. I mean, my dogs, people can barely walk through my front door. It's really unfortunate sometimes. I love them, though. Channel 7 News reported a man hiding in an attic in Spartanburg, South Carolina, 5 years ago. Candy Ball had a bad feeling, and later that day, someone called her and told her that a car thief may be hanging around with her son. Lo and behold, later that day, she found him living in the attic. Davis Woolman came home one day about 2 years ago and his lights were on. He didn't think much about it at first, but then he heard some noises from the attic and noticed that his office light, which was previously off, had been turned on. Davis knocked on his own office door, and a woman's voice said, "Jimmy? Is that you, Jimmy?" He called 911 and she opened the door and he was staring right into the face of a woman standing in his office. She claimed it was her house. She claimed Jimmy said she could stay there. She left before police arrived and she was not apprehended. Davis Woolman never did find out who Jimmy is.
So about 20 years ago, I had something kind of similar happen. I was in my apartment at the time. I had a 2-bedroom apartment. My roommate was not there. I had a friend over that was there kind of late, and he had left. And I don't think I locked the door behind him or anything. So I eventually went back to my bedroom, and it was probably 2, 3 in the morning. I was just sitting at my computer, and all of a sudden I hear some noises out in the apartment. And I thought that my roommate had just came home after the bar or something, just making noise. All of a sudden, my bedroom door, flies open. And I'm sitting, 3 feet from him, and there's some dude there that I've never seen before. And I'm like, hey. He's like, who are you? I'm like, who are you? He's like, this is my place. I'm like, no, it's not your place.
I can't believe I've never heard this story.
I kind of forgot about it until you mentioned that other story. And so we're nose to nose with this guy. He's wanting... He's wanting to get into my room so he can see his clothes in the closet. I'm like, your clothes ain't in this closet, bro. This is not your place. And he pauses. And he's looking around down the hallway. And he's like, things are a little bit different. He's like, it's really the same. Yeah, well, all the apartments, they all have the same layout because they're apartments and they all look the same. He's like, oh man. Yeah, I should probably go. Yeah, you probably should. So I'm escorting him to the door, and he's being really apologetic. And so I got him basically out the door now, and he says, hey man, I'm gonna throw a party soon. I want you to be there. Yeah, right on. You know where I live, so you can just drop on by, shoot me that invite, and we'll get together. But that never happened. And actually, what I think happened, I think he just went into the wrong building. Because all the buildings look the same. And so he went in the building, up the stairs, first door on the left, and it was open.
Right.
Just walked in.
Makes sense, but definitely creepy. I mean, it seems like
that could have been a really bad situation. I mean, it didn't turn out bad, but I mean, a situation like that could turn bad really fast. I mean,
Yeah, I think I was a lot more conscious of actually locking the door before I went to bed after that.
I'm sure.
3 years ago, Inside Edition reported a Pittsburgh family of 3, Jerome, Ashley Kennedy, and their daughter, hearing noises in their home. Then Jerome saw a light coming down through a vent or pipe area through his attic. Jerome got a surveillance camera and installed it into the attic the next day. When they were watching it the next evening, a neighbor was in their attic with a power drill. 69-year-old Robert Havrilla. He had made a removable wall so he could gain access into their attic from his own home. The homes were connected. He had placed a hole in the common wall. He was creeping on them. I'm not sure how the family resolved this situation, but I do hope that they moved.
I think that just watching people or as you say, creeping on people is one thing, but when you're 70 and you're resorting to carpentry so that you can really get in there, what's after that? Where do you graduate to at 70 after you making movable walls? Are cameras next? Are you putting cutting out eye holes in pictures?
I mean, it makes you wonder what else he's done in his life.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't just start doing that in your late 60s.
I also found one of those super short news stories from NBC News in 2012 that stated that a South Carolina woman heard noises coming from her attic and found a man sleeping inside a heating unit. A mom of 3 in Australia noticed some things moved and checked her security system, which had been disabled. She went to the doctor and came home and found that someone had been cooking chicken nuggets.
Chicken nuggets.
The air conditioner was on, which was previously off, and the back door was open. She found the attic hatch ajar. Someone had been living in there. And that story was actually from 2021.
Wow.
And that concludes today's podcast, True Crime Friends. You can find us on Twitter at coffeemurder_. You can find us on Instagram at coffeecigarettesandmurder. You can email us at coffeecigarettesandmurder@gmail.com. Stay safe, my friends. Evil people are everywhere.
Tell somebody you love them.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Coffee, Cigarettes, and Murder.